Hello, in this video you'll learn how to use popovers, mud dialogues as they are called in MudBlazor and Blazor. So one of these things, when you click on something, it pops up. It's a very nice dialog window, modal window, you might also know it as. And then also we'll have a little snack bar thing. So this little thing right here, and it can have different colors, different arrangements in there. So we will look at that, how we can set it up, how we can pass parameters and all those different difficult things. Now, to get started, first let's cover the popover, the dialog thing. That's probably a bit more difficult than a snackbar. A snackbar is just essentially display a message and then it disappears and then you can set some settings. But popover, you can pass different sort of settings, and essentially what it becomes a different component. So you're displaying that component in a sort of nice overlay. You don't have to add your own styling. It's already taken care of by Blazor. And for this example, we have a little table, just some predefined data. Nothing really is going on here, but we have a couple of buttons: view, complete, cancel. Those will open slightly different components for display, and they will take perhaps different parameters as well. But this is the example, and to get started, let's start with the confirm dialog. So we saw them in the beginning. We have confirm dialog, and then we have order details dialog. They will be exactly the same, but what they are is a Blazor component, confirm dialog.razor, we call this one, and you will see everything that goes into a dialog, it goes into a certain arrangement. First, we start the tree with a mud dialog. Then we have dialog content and dialog actions. Now you could put everything in dialog content, it doesn't matter so much, but you do need to have that mud dialog, because otherwise it won't work really properly. But it's good to use dialog actions, so then everything is properly aligned at the bottom, the buttons and the text and everything else is at the top. There are a few other options you might see. You have the content and container provider, but basically what you need is only these two things: the content and then the actions, and that's it. And there will be other settings once we kind of get out of this component that you can set, but one very important thing, or probably the most important thing, what makes a component an actual dialog that you can use it as a dialog, is this cascading parameter IMudDialogInstance. So this is very important. This is what lets you essentially interact with the component from its parent component and close it and open it and do all those things. Now, we do have a couple of buttons here. We take the reference to the dialog, we use close, and then the result, which will be returned. Once the dialog finishes, you will see that later, or cancel, it will return void essentially, because we will have a sort of show arrangement where it stops and it waits for that, and it will be able to give you essentially some kind of an answer, some kind of a user input in the middle of some kind of a flow. But the main important part is this cascading parameter, IMudDialogInstance. Don't confuse it with MudDialogInstance. You always need to use IMudDialogInstance. Around the internet, there are some examples, and you often see that MudDialogInstance, but we are using IMudDialogInstance because the other simply won't work. That's how it is set up. And then again, MudDialog. So now let's see how it's being used. So now we are back in the orders.razor, the page from which we have a dialog, and this would correlate with the cancel order button. So we want to cancel the order, but first we want to kind of notify the user just to make sure that it's a good thing that we're doing, it's what we need to do, and all those things. And we need to display a few things. So we can pass dialog parameters. In this case, we do button text, color, content text. And if we go to the confirm dialog now, let's look right away at the parameters just so we don't get confused. This one is very similar as the other one, right? This one has cascading parameters, IMudDialogInstance. Again, it's exactly the same. The only difference compared to the previous one is that we have parameters. And if we get back to the orders, this is how you pass the parameters. You use DialogParameters from the MudBlazor library, right? And then the name will correspond to that property that you have in that component. Again, it is a component, and in components you have parameter, public, get, set, and all that. Just a normal component parameter, really. Other than that IMudDialogInstance, the cascading parameter, there's nothing else to it. Other parameters will be normal component parameters. You just don't put your sort of component inline with the HTML, but you construct it in your C# code like this, with all the options and all those things. But if you want to pass parameters, and you can pass anything, just like a normal component, you do it like this. The property name, then whatever value you want to insert. And as you can see, in this case, we're putting in some text. Do you want to cancel this order and all that? Just a little example here. But you can pass anything you want. And the color in this case, we are putting as error for the cancellation button, because we want a red color. The next thing, quite important, is the actual options. So these are not your custom parameters, but these are what the dialog has in itself. There are a few options. Probably one of the more important ones is the actual width, depending on how much content you have. This is something you should consider setting, because you basically have more or less two options. It's going to be either very wide or just a tiny little thing. Like in this case, we have cancellation. We don't need a massive thing. For the order details, we might use larger size. And then whether the close button exists or not. You do want to default that or do something with it. But another thing is, besides the closing and opening, there is a backdrop click. Now, as you can see, the suggestion here is backdrop click close. That's not true, actually. Backdrop click is backdrop click. And that's essentially you put, you press your mouse, click your mouse rather, on that overlay, on that shadow, on that background of your actual modal. So if you click on that and it's set to true, then the dialog will close and it will move on. If you set it to false, then the backdrop click is disabled and you won't be able to do anything. So again, if you need to actually get that user input, confirm something, you'll probably have to set it to false. Or if it's just perhaps a little advertisement, order something, to not forget something, essentially just a pop-up to remind someone, or things of that nature, then you don't have to do it. Then you can just close it, the background click, and that's going to be perfectly fine. So something to consider and something not to forget, because that might ruin the actual UX for some important things, or it could actually cause problems if a user doesn't insert anything and you don't handle the null values and all those things. Might cause some real damage in the real world. The next thing, of course, at this point we have options, then we have parameters. Now we can display the dialog. This is where it gets a bit tricky, and this is where you sort of need to pay close attention. It used to be that you show and it doesn't display, or it doesn't move on, but essentially the point of a dialog is that your method will stop here and it won't move forward until the user provides some kind of an input. Now, in order to achieve that, just using ShowAsync is not enough. You also need to get the dialog result and then use dialog result await. This is where it will actually stop. It will stop and wait for that result, and then we can deal with the result. But as for the parameters, we just have the title for the dialog, which you could argue is not very, doesn't have much need for it, because we're doing everything sort of custom. But then, of course, we add the parameters and the options. That's it. You don't have to worry about anything else. And again, the title we can leave blank. It doesn't matter. But the main important thing to remember, we use ShowAsync to get the actual reference to the dialog. And then we use await result to block the whole thing until the user provides some input. And then we can read all kinds of results essentially from this arrangement. So whether it's cancelled or not, that's going to be true or false. And if we go to the confirmed dialog, you will see right here, this is a little override for cancel. So dialog cancel, that's going to be on click on this. Cancel, dialog cancel, that provides a cancellation. That means it was cancelled, and that means this will be true. If it goes, then let's get back here. If we use close and we use some kind of a dialog result, which there are not too many options here, we only have two. We have cancel and OK, but with OK, we can provide a response. And let's get back here. Then the result will be successful, but not cancelled. One other thing we can do, we can also provide the data from here. That gets perhaps a bit more tricky. So let's look at how you actually directly use that or not use that, depending on your actual needs. So for the actual result, this is where it would be if you want to use that data. You have OK, and that's going to be your object. Now, in this case, it's true. And if we add, say, something like this, let's remove that red thing. Let's do, well, something like this. The suggestion is saving us. Essentially, result data, that's always going to be an object. And in this case, we'll just check if it's equal. If we run it, it will work perfectly fine. So you use the data, you cast it, and it's true. Now, if we go back to the confirmed dialog, you can see we can do something like this, a string. So now it becomes a type of string, perfectly okay as well. And now you don't need to add any sort of type definitions here or anything like that. Just remember to cast those objects properly if you actually want to do that. Now, do you want to do that? It becomes a bit of a debate. Sometimes you must return some data, especially if you require some kind of an input, then to perhaps fetch some data and something. But usually true or false works well, and that's kind of how you should limit the use of mod popovers. Although sometimes, of course, it can go a bit further than that, and perhaps you're refreshing data, perhaps you're fetching data, and you can move it along like this. But again, it can get a bit tricky, and you should be a bit careful about that because there is casting involved, and it can get troublesome. Now then, let's look at the Snackbars. So we have the dialog covered. We can look at the Snackbars, and if we go back to the orders, we will find here the little Snackbar arrangement. We have a get status color. I'll show that right away. That's not that interesting. We'll just get a specific color, so it's more reusable. But there are more of these things sort of set up here. You can watch or rather take a look at the code on Patreon. It's all available. And as far as the Snackbar goes, you can see right here, we can actually take view order details. It doesn't matter really. We have a very similar arrangement here, and this is not quite correct. This should be like this, just to kind of fix it before we move along. But Snackbar, you just add the values and you have everything ready. So you have your message and then you have your severity info. Now the colors overriding them, it won't be that sort of simple. You can't really do that at the moment, at least. Maybe there will be some more options coming in the future, but there are some options you can actually provide. Just to cover the actual usage, what you do is you inject ISnackbar, Snackbar. And just getting back to the dialog, you need to inject IDialogService, not DialogService, which again, some sources may suggest to you on the internet, but it is IDialogService, just like IMudDialogInstance. Now, let's look at some of those options. So here is a more complicated Snackbar, but again, the idea is quite simple. It's not like the dialog where you actually have to create a component and do all those things. You just use add and everything is done in one method. And this one, again, it's exactly the same. You have whatever you want to display, maybe some error, or maybe something else. Make sure it is a user-friendly error, though. It's not for logging. It's easier sometimes to confuse when you have an exception. You might put a log and the same message in this. You don't want to probably expose your exceptions to your users. But if you want configuration, one useful thing to add is visible stage duration. This is how long it will actually be available. So you can make it longer, and usually you want to extend it because you can see right here the defaults to 5 seconds essentially. In general, that's not really enough time to see it, and problems do occur when users don't see the error. They complain that nothing happened. And there's also a debate whether you actually want to use Snackbars, because you saw they are sort of tucked in the corner. Maybe not all that visible. So it can be used for sort of maybe not very important notifications, but if you have form errors or something went wrong, errors when submitting a form, and you have a very large form, very distracting one, perhaps it's better to use a little piece of text under the button or something of that nature, because again, the visibility, it can be a bit difficult. What you can also do is actually override the on-click button. Usually nothing happens when you click on it. When you hover on it, it will actually stop. It won't disappear. That sort of cycle will stop, or at least it should. But on-click, you can do a few different things. In this one, we just set order status, just so we can actually check that it works, but you can override on clicks. Maybe you want to override it to open MudDialog with a sort of more detailed error. You can do all those things with this on-click override, and that's probably one of the only use cases for this. But do check out the Patreon. There's some free courses for certain subscription tiers, and do check out the previous videos on the MudBlazor. There's setups and tables and charts as well, so lots of different things in terms of MudBlazor, and lots of different things in terms of .NET and the .NET world and the modern .NET world in .NET 10. And with that said, we will conclude this video.